So let me start with a 5 to 6 minutes, very short, going back briefly into the history of archiving. So documentation archives, and building archives, or as you probably know, was already started in the late 90s. So Archive of Digital Art, Medienkunstnetz in Germany, Longrois Foundation in Canada, Ghana, European Union, Netzspannung, etc. They started in the late 90s, and at that time, the big problem was that there was no funding available. So it was a project here, 2 years funding, a project there, another 3 years funding, and then no more money. And so a number of these archives, which were around at that time, they don't exist anymore, or they exist in a frozen state, say, of 2003, and they are not anymore usable for scientific purposes. So in Bern, at the beginning of this Media History Conference series, which I was organizing at that time and still helped with the board, we had in 2005 the very first meeting on, there were also other meetings before, but there was the idea to bring together the field and to see what other archives are doing, and if we can have some common interests and if we can create something together. But it was at a very early time, and I think it was around 2008 or 9 that Roger Molina from Leonardo came up with the idea, why not copying the idea of what astronomers have, so the virtual observatory, since he's also an astronomer, for digital art, or for the documentation of digital art. They have the system, this virtual observatory, that I think 12 or 14 nations at that time paid in a common fund, and so where all the connected, not archives, but connected observatories could do research on the celestial data. So they were sharing the material, and basically it's a little bit the same what we also could develop for our field, but of course our funding structures, they are not as advanced like in the in astronomy. So and then, but based on this idea, or maybe influence on that idea, we in 2011 at the Media Histories Conference in Liverpool started the Liverpool Declaration, where this also was pressed in words, and so 600 scholars and museum people also signed this declaration so far. And one point was, of course, better international funding structures, like in astronomy or like the natural sciences and so on, and mostly the interoperability of archives that was envisioned at that time. So, and as you know, these archives are totally important, and the last session was just a very brief overview on the archives which are part of this initiative at the moment, but we hope to open it up, that there are more archives can join or can use our ideas, or can add to that at a later point. But as you know, these archives are the foundation not only for research, or also for teaching, but also for museums, so that they know what is all out there, which kind of technology is used. If they have the idea and the intention to start their own collection, then they know what they need to do. And so we yeah, so this was the picture for the Media Histories Conference series. Here are some of the names of who signed the Liverpool Declaration I just mentioned. And so what we also need is a kind of a list, and also in the archive, in these archives where we have where we enlist all these case studies which are done already, so to preserve the different genres, so like mixed virtual art, telematic art, like interactive art, internet art, glitch art, etc. Since all these studies, they're all out there, and it's more a question of how to connect all those. And then, of course, the Saurus work is very important, and this will be also, as you will see in a little bit, a crucial point for our archives and how to bring these together through the Saurus or through certain keywords. But we will get back to this later on. So, so one, and as I said earlier, the archives are the foundation museums who would like to start a collection, but still this work is this challenge is way too big for individual institutions like one museum or so. So in Germany we started an initiative where from the 700 museums we have, 5% should participate, like 35 museums, build a network supported by the federal government, and then raise this problem from individual museum to a larger network, where we then can deal with the issue of preserving, since it's way too complex for just one individual institution. And so now we have basically two things which we want to and I also want to mention that of course in the recent history Wim van der Plas and Bonnie Mitchell and colleagues also did a lot of for developing this whole service for the field, and through the summits, women South Africa, in Korea, in Canada, on a remote, and now here, and so as it will be this our hope to fulfill the Liverpool Declaration, and so some of the first steps have been done by Bonnie and her team, and I think she will take over now.
Thank you. Great, Oliver. Yes, Oliver got this initiative started, and we've built onto it. And so one of the things that we do as part of building these archives, SIGGRAPH and ISEA, is that we get students involved. And we feel as though it's very important for them to learn the history of media art, but also to get involved with creating these archives that really are kind of bringing that history and making it a living entity today. And so I have a video from two of the students that have really been transformative. And so I'm going to see if I can jump over there to it. Oh, here she comes to the rescue. Is that it? And so let me tell you a little bit about these students. First of all, we hired them on as with a little student grant that we had. And it turns out that they were both brilliant. Okay, one of them is from Mexico and one of them is from Ohio, where I live. Just to tell you how brilliant they are, typically the interns, I tell them what to do. These interns were telling me what needed to be done and doing it.
I have also these.
Isn't that great to have students like that? Yeah. And so, and just to kind of tell you again how brilliant they are, one of them, the one from Mexico, Louise Wilson, graduated immediately as an undergraduate, got hired at Microsoft. And the female, she's still, her name's Alexa Mahajan, and she is still in school. And she just got hired at Pixar. This is her first week at work. So she's working there this summer. And she's developing software tools for artists and for the animators. So I asked them to put together a video talking about their role and what they're doing in regards to the initiative that Oliver was talking about, Connecting Archives. Now, I will have to preface this with one thing before we start the video, is it started with meetings with Ada and with Ars Electronica, and then File Festival joined in, and the File Festival folks were creating a brand new archive, so we worked with them very closely to get our taxonomies in alignment, and their programmer, Dalton Martins, came up with all kinds of ideas about how we might approach this problem technically. These two students took off with it and started doing brilliant things. So we're going to watch their videos.
Hello, my name is Alexa Mahajan, and I'm a programmer for the SIGGRAPH History Archives. My contributions towards this archive connection project have been focused mainly on user interface development and actually addressing how this connection would be viewed and interacted with by users of our archives. So I began by designing a means for connection data to be input into our archives database and subsequently displayed on the front end of the site through icons. So for example, As you scroll down to the bottom of a person's profile page, such as with our example here of Krista Summer, a series of other archives icons can be seen. When a person has an entry in another archive, the appropriate icon for that archive will appear and link to the corresponding web page within that other archive. So here, with the case of Krista, she can also be found in the ISEA, Ars Electronica, and Ada archives, as indicated by the icons that appear on her profile page. So if we click on one of these icons, we will be taken to Krista's page in that other archive. So for example, we can view her profile page in ISEA. The goal of this project is for the connection to be bidirectional. So if we scroll down to the bottom of Krista's profile page here in ISEA, once again, we will see those same archive connection icons appear. In this case, she now has a SIGGRAPH history icon instead of the ISEA icon. And if we click on it, it will take us back to that original profile page we were just on in the SIGGRAPH history archives. Looking to the back end of the site, we can see what this connection looks like from an entry standpoint. Our goal was to establish this connection between archives without having to manually enter each connection. Thus, the system is set up so that these connections will automatically be displayed on the front end of the site as data fields are dynamically populated within our database using our data comparison process, as we will be discussing in greater detail shortly. Each archive has a URL field where our archive connection data can be input, as seen here. And when a field contains a URL, the profile page template code will display the appropriate archive icon. Another aspect of this project was developing an application to be used by the involved archives to actually compare data exports and identify the connections that could be made. We realized that this would play a crucial role in the success of our project, as it revealed a need for sanitization of our databases and preliminary restructuring work to achieve the best results and establish consistency across exports. So I contributed to this process in developing the front-end interface for our application using Python. The interface allows users to choose two archives and run a comparison between their database exports. So as seen in this demonstration, it also integrates appropriate error handling to ensure users can accurately execute the comparison between databases. The comparison code run by this interface was developed by our programmer, Louise Wilson, who will now be discussing the process of actually exporting and comparing data across our archives to establish these connections.
Hi, my name is Louise Wilson, and I am one of the programmers for the SIGGRAPH Archive. Not able to present live, so I hope you enjoyed this video presentation. So, connecting archives. It's quite a challenge, mainly because every archive has their own data and their own way of representing that data, making it hard for non-humans to identify which info is actually the same between two or more data sources. The solution involves having a central point of reference every involved archive knows about. That way, the sites can easily identify which pieces of information are the same and link to others, like you were shown previously. The difficult part is getting to that point, so let's see that in more detail. First, we have data sanitization. This is something that every archive should aspire to do continuously to keep their information consistent. A very prevalent issue with SIGGRAPH, for example, was duplicate entries. For that, what we tried first was developing a script that analyzed an export of data, specifically people, against itself. This script uses fuzzy string matching algorithms. These algorithms don't do a one-on-one comparison between texts, but instead give you a percentage of how close the two strings are. This helps us indicate issues like typos, missing or extra names, nicknames, and so on. If we don't have our data cleans, comparing our input to a single archive becomes much more difficult. So we really want to make sure we sanitize our data before attempting anything else. Other options we've started to consider are software like OpenRefine, which is a very straightforward and fast way to convert data, with some options for different algorithms. This is good as it's something we don't have to maintain ourselves. Now that our data is clean, it's time for that central point of reference I mentioned previously. This should serve as the only source of truth.
Sorry, I need to repeat it. Sorry. Just a minute.
It didn't get shared with the remote people, and we have quite a few remote participants, so I'm so sorry. I will explain to the people remotely that the video, unfortunately,
Hi, my name is Luis Wilson.
you may not have seen it, but you'll see it now. So they
Hi,
didn't
Sorry.
share
I'm
it.
Luis Wilson, and I'm one of the programmers for the ISEA Archives. I'm not able to present live, so I hope you enjoy this video presentation. So, connecting archives. It's quite a challenge, mainly because every archive has their own data and their own way of presenting said data, making it hard for non-humans to identify which info is actually the same between two or more data sources. The solution involves having a central point of reference every involved archive knows about. That way, the sites can easily identify which pieces of information are the same and link to others, like you were shown previously. The difficult part is getting to that point, so let's see that in more detail. First, we have data sanitization. This is something that every archive should aspire to do continuously to keep their information consistent. A very prevalent issue at SIGRA, for example, was duplicate entries. For that, what we tried first was developing a script that analyzed an export of data, specifically people, against itself. This script uses fuzzy string matching algorithms. These algorithms don't do a one-on-one comparison between texts, but instead give you a percentage of how close the two strings are. This helps us indicate issues like typos, missing or extra names, nicknames, and so on. If we don't have our data clean, comparing our info to external archives becomes much more difficult. So we really want to make sure we sanitize our data before attempting anything else. Other options we've started to consider are software like OpenRefine, which is a very straightforward and fast way to convert data, with some options for different algorithms. This is good as it's something we don't have to maintain ourselves. Now that our data is clean, it's time for that central point of reference I mentioned previously. This should serve as the only source of truth for our information, and this is how data between archives will be linked. Luckily, such thing exists, and it's called Wikidata. It's a free and open knowledge base that is actively used by other projects, including Wikipedia. One can add items into Wikidata or even edit existing ones. Every item in Wikidata has a QID, a unique identifier. And by syncing our archives' data with Wikidata items QID, archive A could know for sure if an item they have is the same as one in archive B. Of course, syncing an archive's data into Wikidata is another big challenge. Like with the data duplicate problem, there is a lot of comparisons to be done, and many of the same issues we presented earlier that would make any non-human struggle to find matches will come up again. Fortunately, there are online tools that will aid us in this journey, including a Wikidata API. Once archives have QIDs in their items, each archive should share their items page URL with other archives. This could be easily done with an API. Let's say archive A has person John Doe and already linked it to Wikidata. So it has a QID equal to, let's say, Q20. Archive B also did their part of the job, so they have John Doe in their database as well, with the Q20 QID. Now, archive A wants to see if archive B also has an entry for John Doe. A only needs to ask B if they have a Q20 in their database, and if they do, they should return the URL to the corresponding page archived. With this URL, Archive A can display a 3D button that takes you to the same item in Archive B.
So I want to thank our students for paving the way to actually making this happen.